right, good afternoon. My name is Rebekkah Hudson. This is an interview about Strega Nona's oven for the Gainesville Business History Oral History Project run by the Inquire Capitalism program of the History Department at the University of Florida. Understand that for us and for the public, the information you're providing is a gift as it is an incredible historical resource and we dearly appreciate it. This interview will be available as part of UF Oral History Collections and through UF Digital History Collections and YouTube. Please introduce yourself and what is your full name? Could you spell it?
So my full name is Kenneth, Kenneth, Kingswell, Kingswell.
Perfect. To begin, do you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself? You're from South Bend, Indiana, right?
I was born there and eventually made my way to Pensacola, Florida. Come from a military family, so we traveled around a lot. But majority of my formative years of middle school, high school was in Gulf Breeze, Florida, which is across the bay from Pensacola.
What was your experience like growing up there?
It was great. There was water all around. Got to be outside a lot. Fished, surfed, hunted, just all kinds of everything from camping to, there were lots of things to do.
Right. I remember you discussing that memory of being during the summers on the beach and how it had some spark of inspiration for your entrepreneurial side. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so during the summers, both my parents worked, so they would drop me off at the beach with a few dollars in my pocket, and I had friends that would hunt shells with me. We would dive for sand dollars and we would sell them to tourists. Plus at the time there used to be, you can still see like the kitschy little seashell shops by the sea, where you can get shells and things. So that's what we would do. We would sell our shells to the shop to make lunch money, drink money. We'd also fish. We would catch fish, not in massive quantities, but enough that we could sell it to the local fishmonger and make money that way too. And so that was my first foray into kind of being an entrepreneur, but it was more a self-sufficiency kind of deal to make money. Right. It wasn't until I got my first job in Gulf Breeze, I worked at a gas station just pumping gas and checking tires and checking oil, and it's like a full service gas station that you hardly see anymore, but I used to be around. This was early to mid 80s when that happened.
Wonderful. So what brought you to Gainesville?
I ended up in Gainesville after I got out of the Navy to finish an engineering degree, and while that was going on, I wanted a part-time job, and I just started working in a local restaurant in town. So I've been doing that. I did part-time work in the restaurant and kind of channeled the restaurant experience into a new career from engineering.
Right. You mentioned spending some years in the Navy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so out of high school, I joined the nuclear power program in the Navy. I went to, they used to have basic training in Orlando. So I went to Orlando, basic training. Then I went to mechanical engineering school there. Then I went to nuclear power school there. Then from there, I went to upstate New York, so Saratoga Springs area, to work at actual physical mock-up of a nuclear power plant. So I worked there, qualified, and then I was sent to my submarine, which was in Connecticut. So I was based in Connecticut, but the actual submarine was in Holyloch, Scotland. So what we would do, so I don't know if you know, but in Kings Bay we have missile submarines, and it's the same kind of thing. So that base was kind of closing on its last leg, and they were developing Kings Bay in Georgia. So we would fly from Connecticut to Scotland. We would do maintenance on the sub with the other crew. Then the other crew would move off, we'd move on, and we'd do that cycle all year round. So I'd be at sea 6 months out of the year and back the other 6 months out of the year.
So when you were doing that, was there any inkling that you knew that you would want to have a business in the future? Not
really. I was more interested in the engineering field, what I was going to do after I got out of the Navy, doing subcontracting work at various power plants around the country, and decided, it seems like I'm still in the Navy living out of a suitcase. let me go to school and finish that endeavor. And then I just ended up in food that way.
Right. So like, how do you think that your background, this military background, your engineering background, how do you think it affected your eventual career path?
There's a lot of moving pieces and parts in a restaurant, and it's kind of, you have to have specific systems in place. Basic inventory. You have to know where everything is. How much of X do you have? How much of Y do you have? How much does that cost? It's the same from an engineering background. It's just different moving pieces and parts. So I think that laid the groundwork to be able to transition over into the restaurant industry.
So when we were talking before, you also talked a little bit about your mom and her influence, as well as your dad in your childhood and what will eventually become your piece of business. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so when we were growing up, because my dad was in the Navy, so obviously he was gone, 6-8 months at a time. And so we would help mom around the house. So I have 2 sisters. Each one of us had to cook a meal during the week because my mom also worked part-time as we got older. So we would cook a meal, and my dad always, when he came back from sea, he would love to cook. So that's kind of where the love of cooking came from, was from him. And then having to do it, so you if it was your meal, you got to pick whatever you wanted to make. So, I mean, we weren't having lobster and shrimp every time, but, simple stuff, tacos, hamburger helper, ramen, but, you could put your own flair on it and everybody had to eat it. So, it was always a competition who could make the better meal. So.
That's really interesting, that competitive aspect, because we'll talk about that a little bit later with your own life now. Were there any other entrepreneurs or business figures in your family or community who inspired you?
My best friend in high school, his dad was a college book salesman. So now it seems archaic, but 20, 30 years ago, there were people that would sell books to various colleges and universities and different departments, and he was a business person in that aspect. I didn't know too much of what he did, but I knew that he was a business person. He was always traveling. He was kind of an influence. My grandfather and uncle, they were stonemasons, so they had their own business, but I never really interacted with them on a business aspect as far as that's concerned. But you could say they were entrepreneurs in some respect. They were more craftsmen than, people either love the business or hate the business, or you just want to do the work and not bother with the business side. So I like to do both.
That's wonderful. So going back a little bit more into your first steps into the business world, specifically with restaurant work, can you kind of walk us through that a little bit? So
anytime you start in a restaurant, you always start at the bottom. If you're back of the house, you're going to learn to wash dishes first. And it's the same in the military. You start at base level and you work your way up. The more tasks you can do, the more responsibilities you get, the farther and the higher you can go. So it's basically up to the individual to decide, how far they want to go with it. Front of the house, it would be, you start as a hostess, and then you work your way to a server or a bartender or a shift manager. It's the same kind of hierarchy that you find in the military. So I would say that's the similar aspects of the two, and that's why it was so easy to move from engineering to the restaurant world.
Right. That first restaurant you worked at, does it still exist?
It does. It's still in Pensacola on the beach. It's owned by different people, but I pop in there once in a while if I'm back home, and I'll go and, I have pretty good memories of hanging out on the beach and, cooking all day long and then having fun afterwards.
What kind of restaurant was it?
Seafood, mostly, yeah.
Wonderful. So going to your business is vastly different than seafood. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
Your business idea was born after a trip to Italy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. So my wife and I traveled to Italy for 14 days. Her son, my stepson, was getting married. He was in the military, in the Navy, and he was stationed in Naples, Italy, birthplace of pizza. At which point I had no clue about Naples, Italy. I had been stationed in Scotland, so I was more familiar with England, Ireland, Great Britain, Scotland. Had never been to Italy or Spain. And so we went for the wedding, and we just ate with the family, and they would eat all day, but it wasn't like big, huge meals, so you didn't really feel like bloated or, like heavy food. It was just, Mediterranean, simple olives, bread, fresh tomatoes, vegetables. And they cooked everything. Like they had friends of theirs that owned restaurants, but they would not go in and eat at the restaurant because they felt they could cook better than the people at the restaurant. And why spend your money? Although it is very cheap to eat in Italy.
Mm. So like was there a specific memory from those 14 days where you were like, I need to do this?
Yeah, I had pizza every day. Every day, from Naples to Rome. It was, Rome had different pizza style, and I was like, wow, I had never seen this pizza style in Rome. And then in Naples, like the wood-fired pizza, I'd never, I'm living in Gainesville, I'm having 5-star, I'm having Domino's, Pizza Hut. I'm thinking, wow, I've been eating this stuff for how long? This stuff's way better. So that was the impetus for, it was the starting point. It was when I got back, I just did a deep dive on researching wood-fired ovens. How can I build one in the backyard? Because I had the engineering background. I could design it, I could build it. I just did a deep dive for a year, looking at plans that I want to build it from scratch. And then I found a company that was actually putting the ovens on trailers. And at that point I said, well, I do catering now. It shouldn't be so hard to do pizza catering. So now, mind you, at this point, I had never made a pizza in my entire life, not even, the Chef Boyardee pizza box. I'd never made that before. And I baked bread, but I wasn't a big, like, they're sourdough freaks now. It wasn't like that, 20 years ago. And so that was, the whole plan was to get an oven, put it on a trailer, do catering with it. So I had the groundwork, but I didn't know like the business side. So I started learning more and more from the owner I work for now at Honey Baked Ham, who's allowed me be gracious enough to allow me the use of his kitchen space, and whatever I needed, he would help me. He was my mentor, still is. So I had to learn how to make pizza. So I basically spent 2 years making pizza just in my home oven to get it to the point where I thought people would eat it. They would at least buy it, right? They'd give it a try. But I didn't have an oven at that point. So I found an oven. It was about $1,000. And I'm like, okay, well, I can take a gamble. It's $1,000. Got the oven, and there were logistical problems with it, but it was fine. And then I went to several events, and it just started kind of picking up to where, okay, now I need to scale it to get a larger oven, to size oven I have today. And so then I got that oven. But, for the first 5 years, you're basically trying to get your, return on investment back, which I did. So, and right now I'm looking at buying a new oven, so.
Mm-hmm. That's super cool. So some of those events you were going to, like, were they family friends or was it work events?
No, it was Downtown Arts Festival, Santa Fe Art Festival. We went up to Live Oak. They have music shows up there at the park up there. Just little things like that. Hogtown Beer Festival. They were just starting out. And this was when Swamphead was first in their first location, that I had met the owner, Luke, there, and was just constantly in his ear about, hey, I'm going to do this pizza thing. I'm going to do this pizza thing. And he was like, okay, well, when you get your oven, then come and talk to me. And then eventually they had moved, but So I've done, Swamp Head, First Magnitude. I'm at Blackadder Brewing now. That's my mainstay on Fridays, and then the farmers market on Saturdays.
Right. Were there any other inspirations before you really think you started your business, other than that trip and going to these events?
No, I think the trip really solidified me doing pizza. And then it was the research and knowing that if I put the work and the time in, not that it would be successful, but I would feel successful regardless of the monetary outcome.
Right.
So it was more a side passion project that turned into a solid business.
So with that side passion project, I know your family definitely had some input, and I want to talk about the name of your business. If you could state it again and kind of just talk about the origin story.
So the name of the business is Strega Nona's Oven. My wife is called Nona by our side, but the Italian granddaughters call their mothers by their mom's mother Nona, so they call my wife Strega, which is not a very nice word, but that's how they differentiate, the name. So that's how the name came about, and we were trying to come up with the business name, and it was kind of like a family thing.
Is there a specific story or memory you have attached to deciding that was going to be the name?
No, we just were sitting around one day and we were just, everybody, the whole family, even the Italian side, they were like, well, you should be Strega Nona. And then what? I'm like, well, Strega Nona. And at that point, I didn't know any background on Strega Nona or anything. So I didn't really research. I just said, oh, okay, we can do Strega Nona's Oven. And they're like, okay, yeah, that works. And then now we're thinking about just chopping it to just Strega. But I haven't moved that next step. And then come to find out, when people saw us at the market, they were like, oh, there's this book called Strega Nona. And I'm like, no, I had no idea. And there's a book written by, I think, Tommy DiPaolo. He wrote it in the 70s. It's a kid's book about Strega Nona, and she's like the local village kind of not witch, but not as bad as Hansel and Gretel witch, and she's got a magic pasta pot, and I haven't read the whole story, but it's just people all the time, oh, you named your business after Strega. Sure, yes, just nod and go along. And then it wasn't until I was researching the LLC to get the name that I saw that there was a Strega Nona. And then I remembered I had gotten out of the Navy. I was back home in Pensacola. There was a bakery, and it was Strega Nona. So it was kind of like, okay, the name's right. So they were like Strega Nona's Bakery. So, but they went out of business. But they were kind of like, they were kind of like upper crust, right, in Pensacola. It was cool, but Italian bakery. And it just was weird that memory came back to me. I got out of the Navy in 92, 93. And then 15 some years later,
Wow, that's a very interesting connection.
Right.
So you'd mentioned earlier working for Honey Baked Ham, and you're currently the manager there, right? Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that's affected your business?
I have customers from both businesses, actually, that they'll come in at Honey Baked Ham and they'll give me the look. Oh, you're the pizza guy. Yes, I am the pizza guy, but I also do this. This is my full-time gig, and vice versa. So I've had pizza customers find out, well, where were you, Easter Saturday? We missed your pizza at the market. I was making hams. That's where I was. So that's kind of how, there's a core group of customers that come in and know I do pizza or ham, vice versa.
How has like that mentorship you mentioned by the owner of the restaurant, the Honey Baked Ham, how has that really affected your business? I know you talked before, he was teaching you ropes a little bit, but how does that carry on into the present day?
So for the most part, I use the space. He doesn't charge me to use the space. If I were to rent a space for what I do, it would probably be, $300 or $400 a month. So that's less revenue. So that's nice. As far as the business aspect, anytime I have questions, especially when COVID happened, there was all this COVID money coming there, because of the restaurants were shut down. And he actually said, hey, they're giving grants and stuff out. And I'm like, well, I'm just a very small business. They're not going to loan me any money or give me any money. But I ended up getting, when I first started, I was making dough by hand. I did that for 4 or 5 years. And then I got the big oven. I was still making dough by hand. And so COVID happened, and he told me about this grant through the small SBA, Small Business Association. And I applied for it, and I ended up getting like a $6,000 grant, which helped me buy a mixer, which made making dough easier. So.
You've mentioned before, like that the way that you make dough is very much influenced by like this engineering background and also this arts background. Like, how do you think about that in your mind without, sharing too many?
It's a recipe. So with baking, it's a science, and engineering is science and math. So I use math and science every day making dough. You have to look at times and temperatures, and is it raining today? Is it cold today? Is it hot today? What's the temperature going to be like later? How long can I have the dough out? So it's all, because it's a living, breathing thing, the dough, and it can get away from you pretty fast, and then you don't have pizza to make. So when I run out of pizza, especially on Saturdays, people are like, oh, you're out of dough. Well, just make more. Well, it's a 3-day process. It's kind of tough to make more, or, I've kind of found a sweet spot how many people are going to order based on what day it is, what events are going on in town. So I've kind of got that kind of dialed in, and that's more of a business aspect that I learned from Honey Baked Ham and working in restaurants. But the dough is definitely, I have a formula. I weigh everything out on a scale. I have a certain mix time, how I do X, Y, Z. It's a process, it's just not mix it together and it's good to go. But then the artist side is you have to feel it. So maybe you miscalculated how much salt or water, might feel dry, might feel too wet. Then that's where the tweaks come in. You have to learn to add more or less of something.
Are you still tweaking it to this day?
Yeah, I just changed the recipe last week.
Whoa. How often do you change the recipe?
I try to eat one pizza a week to make quality, make sure that the dough is good. Probably will change it 4 or 5 times a year, but it's not, we're talking like 0.5% of something, right? So 0.5% of 10 is 0.05. So they're not huge changes, but based on time, temperature, it can be a big fluctuation.
Right. That's so interesting. I don't think people think of like that back end process, and especially, we think about like perfecting something, but it's always like. Yeah,
there's no I'm chasing the perfect dough. I haven't had the perfect, like it's good. It's pretty good. This is really good, but I haven't had, this is it locked in. And I think a lot of pizza makers I talk to, they feel the same way. Like if you really think you have something dialed in, then you're never gonna try to get better or to make your product better. So chasing perfection, that's what I'm doing.
That's really interesting, actually. It's like so academic in a way. But again, with pizza, like you would never really connect those. So having, you're the manager, you're also serving Blackter and the market. Can you talk about like a week in your life?
So week in my life, Honey Baked Ham is Monday through Friday, sometimes could be Saturday, Sunday. So we have baseball season, softball season starting up. So I may need to take lunches to the O-Dome or baseball stadium on Saturday or Sunday, or after 5 o'clock, like their night games. So Monday through Friday pretty much is a 10 to 12 hour day at Honey Baked Ham. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after Honey Baked Ham time is dough time. So that's another 3 hours. So that's 3 times 3, 10 hours. So another 30 hours pizza business on top of the 10 to 20. So 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours sometimes.
Wow. You're very dedicated. That's very interesting. And selling your pizzas to the local brewery on Fridays, how did you get involved with them?
So there is a kind of beer and wine shop on my side of town over by Tower Road. It's called Tipples Beer and Wine. And I got to know the owners of that business and said, hey, I've got this pizza truck. Hey, I'd like to come here on Friday. And they're like, okay. So I was doing every other Friday there and then every other Friday at Blackadder Brewing. Then COVID happened and they basically Tipples shut their store down. Blackadder stayed open where they could fill people's growlers by order. So it was harder for the Tipples Beer and Wine to pivot to something like that because people could just go to Publix and get beer or wine instead of going to the local bottle shop. So Blackadder was open. So they said, hey, we're going to be open based on how long we can be open. I think it was 2 or 3 hours in the first couple of weeks before, Governor DeSantis kind of opened things back up in Florida. But they said, hey, try and pre-sell some pizzas. And so that with beer. And so we started doing that. And so we had people locked in coming and buying pizzas and picking up beer and then going home. And since we were kind of an outside kind of business, people were not as, apprehensive to be indoors because we were outdoors. So they would just come to pick it up.
That's really interesting.
So it was like a carry-out concept for both the beer and the pizza.
And for Hale's Farmers Market, how were you aware of them? How did you get involved with them?
Well, I started looking for another place to do pizza. I always try to give myself one day off a week, which is Sunday. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Somebody needs catering, it depends. But anyway, so I saw the farmer's market at Hale. And I've been there at least 10 years. So I've been there pre-pandemic. And there was another pizza place there, but they were on the opposite end. So they were like, okay, well, we'll give you a shot. And we just kept showing up early and we were consistent. And then the other pizza guys were like, this is too early for us. And they just abandoned. So I'm the sole pizza guy at the market. And they've come to me and said, hey, we have this other pizza. I'm like, nope. And they're like, okay. So
that's really cool. What's the process of becoming a vendor at a place like Hale?
So talk to the market manager. They want to have basically 60% of the market be produce, farmers, milk, cheese, vegetables, plants, and then so their split is 60% farm people, and then 20% craft people, like people that crochet, do woodworking, and then the other 20% is food. So that's how they break that down.
How long did it take you to get involved?
I think it probably took me a couple of months before they gave me a shot. Because I said, I'll come out whenever. Like, if somebody calls and they're not going to be there, call me, I will be there. And then it just developed naturally by just showing up, being consistent, and putting the time and the work in.
That's wonderful. So talking about the evolution of your business over the years, are there like key turning points for you?
Yeah, a key turning point from the one little small oven to which was just $1,000 to going to $10,000 out of pocket.
Wow.
So that was a big kind of, jump, and that was another impetus to try to get better, to try to get more business, to just pay that $10,000 back, and then just little key things like going to Italy and competing and making pizza, going to Las Vegas and making pizza, and going to New Jersey and making pizza, and this whole other pizza world, like from the little oven to the big oven, and then finding out there's this whole independent business of pizza.
Mm-hmm. How did you become aware of those opportunities?
There are 2 trade magazines for pizza. One's a little bit bigger than the other, and they tend to put on the bigger shows. Mm-hmm. I think the other magazine, they're trying to catch up and do more food trade shows, but pretty much a lot of associations have like trade shows, whether it's for construction or dentists or doctors, any kind of job. I guarantee you there's a conference or a convention to go so that people can, colleagues can get together and talk about things. And so I learned about like the magazine, it was online, and then I'm like, oh, there are these contests. And so I've always competed in making food, like against my sisters, and then I've done chili cook-offs, salsa making, pizza making. So I like the competitive aspect of making pizza.
What is it about that competitive aspect for you?
To win, to be number one, to have a big trophy, big smile on my face. Absolutely. There's nothing better. It's like, I made the best chili here today.
I want to talk about that full circle moment of going back and making pizza in Italy. Mm-hmm. You said before how you kind of like won the opportunity to go and do that. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of my food suppliers, they put an Instagram post out about, hey, this is a couple of years past COVID, so Italy is now kind of opening back up. They have a major pizza competition in Parma, Italy. It's usually in the spring, and that's where Parmigiano Reggiano, the big cheese, is from, and prosciutto. And so you have to win a competition internationally to get invited to go to that one. Mm. So the food supplier that I knew that posted an Instagram post a couple of years ago said, hey, they're opening Naples back up, and they're going to have an American category. First 35 people that respond to us and say, I have a ticket, and show proof that you have a ticket, we will pay for your hotel room. So, that was hotel rooms like $300-400 a night. So 3-4 days, €1,000, it's pretty nice. So I'm like, I can do that. And then I had the family connection that they were still in Naples, and we hadn't seen them since the pandemic. So it was kind of like a twofold. I'll get to see them, I'll get to compete in pizza. And I had competed in Las Vegas and New Jersey a couple of times, and once in Orlando. And so I kind of was starting to see like the pizza competitors, right? That they're in the contests a lot. But typically when somebody wins, they'll kind of stop competing. They might help somebody else and give them pointers on how to compete. But so we competed in Naples, and I finished 16 out of 35.
Wow.
So, and we went on a flower tour, a farm tour, with the local suppliers that this company uses, and they've known these families. I've been working with these families and these farms for 40, 50 years.
Wow.
So they have a real personal connection to their product, and they only import the best stuff to the U.S.
Right. When you were there, like, what is the scale of it? How many pizzas are you making? How many people were there?
So the Italian side, they obviously competed in making margarita pizza. There's two different. There's two different margarita style. One is very specific in what you can use, and that's kind of like, if you see Italian products, they have like a DOP stamp. It's like a origin stamp that this is approved specifically. And there's an association that governs Italian pizza makers to make the margarita correctly. And then there's a kind of not so, you can kind of mess around with your starter a little bit on the other margarita side. And it's got to be cooked in a wood-fired oven. So a lot of people in the US, they don't cook in a wood-fired oven, but I've never competed in the margarita. Maybe if I competed in that, I might win, but I'm competed in American style. So, but then there's Roman style, there's pan style, there's all these different, like there's probably like 10 different pizza styles you can compete in. But this was the first time that they had brought the American New York style for people to compete in.
Right. That's so interesting. Like, how many competitors were there?
Oh, there was probably 1,000, easy.
Wow. Wow. That's really interesting. And how like different is that than the competitions in the US?
The big one in Vegas, they do it by region. So there's Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, Pacific Northwest, Southwest. So there's 5 regions, and they'll take up to 100 competitors in each region for each style.
Wow.
So, but people are cross platforming the type of pizzas. So one person may enter 3 or 4 categories or styles of pizza. So, but there's probably at least 500 or more competitors in the US, plus not to mention the foreign competitors that come over also.
Right.
So it is international. Like people come from Mexico, Japan. I saw somebody from South America. So Puerto Rico, even in Europe, there are people from Great Britain, France, Spain.
That's very worldwide. Like I feel like, you don't really hear about these things, but it's also so cool. What would you consider your greatest success thus far?
That I'm still in business. And then I'm turning a profit because, the restaurant business is tough. 50% of most restaurants fail in the first year.
Wow.
And that's pretty standard. So I would say that's my greatest success, that I'm 10 years plus in, I have a few employees, everybody's happy, pizza's good. So biggest success is I'm still in business.
That's wonderful. Do you have a time when you faced like a significant setback or a failure, and how do you feel like you worked through that?
Every day there's not a significant setback or failure. It's little things, like you go to a catering event and you're like, okay, we forgot this. What are we gonna do? Right. So you might forget, like a cutting mat. Well, we have pizza boxes. We can cut pizza on the boxes. Sure, it'll ruin some boxes, but what are you gonna do? So there's always something, your tent breaks or it won't pop up, flat tire on the trailer. The biggest thing is dough. So the dough, if it's on the edge of just blowing out and being like a pancake, you got to work with it fast and work. There have been days that I've had to take ice and put in empty dough boxes because it's been so hot to kind of keep it cold and long enough for me to use it. So it's just little things like that. That's pretty much the biggest. It's just the little things. Nothing's, too huge that you can't figure it out.
Right. That's the little things that I feel like, coming from that background you mentioned of, engineering and also working in the restaurant business, I feel like you're good about knowing what to do even in those moments.
Right. Well, the experience certainly helps, yeah.
Right. So have you had any thoughts about like growing and expanding your business?
I've been thinking about putting a second oven on the road, but there's just not enough in town. I would have to create more business to get a second oven. And or, if I had a shop, it's just the opportunity from the business side, from what I've learned is I'm not adverse to taking risks, but I know where my stopping point is. So at this point, other than just purchasing a new oven and getting rid of my old one, I'm perfectly happy with the scale I'm at right now. And actually, now it seems we're kind of, it's ebbs and flows with anything. Life is a bunch of ebbs and flows, and you got to ride the wave when the wave is there, and then when you hit the valley, you got to hold tight. So I feel like we're kind of starting back up on a rise. I'm starting to see more catering orders, people asking, hey, do you do weddings? Can you do this event? So I see more people reaching out to do events probably in the last 6 months than I have in the last year or two. So I see that trend, hopefully. And that's the way I get more businesses, the catering.
Do you know what that might be resulting from, or is it?
No, I mean, just people have more disposable income. They want to have more parties. Sometimes maybe they're not going to take a trip this year, and they were like, okay, well, we're not going to go. And that was the biggest thing during COVID that I saw. More people were having parties then because they couldn't travel, and they were kind of a captive audience. And that's kind of how the Hale Farmers Market expanded, because they were just the straight length, and then now there's like a side street. And so it grew because people got outside of their house and they could walk around, and they couldn't travel anywhere. So that's when we saw more birthday parties, more intimate parties. We would do more like 30 to 40 people parties. Now I'm looking at weddings 70 to 100. So
Interesting. Aside from COVID, do you think what are the impacts of servicing a college town in Gainesville specifically?
Students are fickle. They tend to stick to certain areas. I know when I was here going to school, there was one area that was popular, and it's just every new group of people and or restaurant. I think most restaurants in this town, except for the ones that are well established and are consistent, outside of the chain restaurants. I'll give you a perfect example. Moe's Southwest Grill, right? They came on the scene in Gainesville about 10 years ago, and they just expanded rapidly. And I know that because my owner that I work for, he owned those. And it just was like a hit with families, a hit with students. And then he comes from franchise modality where he opened 4 or 5 of them, and he had them in the right areas. And then the company started changing things because he was a franchise, but he had to follow the rules of the company, and the company was kind of tweaking their menu, and they were starting to get pushback from customers. And so the owner at that point said, well, I think I've taken Moe's as far as I can in town. And so another person offered to buy his Moe's. So he set his sights on Wingstop. So now he has the Wingstops. And so now he's developing. So Halo Donuts went out of business because they were a COVID business that was a mobile food truck, and they had 2 or 3, and that's great, and people came out, but then they thought they could replicate that in a storefront. And that's where I think people get ahead of themselves on, oh, I can have 15 of these. No, one store, yes. 15 in Gainesville. No, there's just not enough people. But so the owner now is working on, he's putting a Wingstop and a Halo Potato Donuts up at 43rd and 53rd. Newberry is becoming larger, so they're putting the Publix out there. So he's putting a Moe's out there, and he's putting one in Alachua.
Wow.
So
It's like really cool the insights you have with working with him. Like, do you ever think that there would be a possibility where he could expand your business if that was something you wanted?
if I expanded it, I would just go to a brick and mortar, and it would be just a small shop that I could work at 5 days a week, you know, a set schedule, and that be it, and have people just, you know, delivery or carry out, no sit down, no tables, no, you know, it'd be like a New York kind of slice shop area kind of deal, but it's kind of hard to find that space with the customer base that could support that, which is why I'm happy just doing what I'm doing right now.
How do you and your business like interact with the other local pizza businesses?
So I interact more with food truck people. If somebody, one of my employees, she works at Bar and Table, and Bar and Table put a restaurant in the Hale Village where they were going to do pizza, because there's another pizza shop there, but they were doing catering for UF, and they stopped making pizza. Well, I said, hey, if they need help with pizza, let me know. I will consult, you know, for a fee. And she said, well, you probably have to, because they have horrible pizza. And so they haven't reached out to me, but I mostly deal with food truck people. I try to help and support other local food trucks if, you know, somebody needs product, or, you know, they are having a problem or an issue, because I think the food truck community is a little bit more tighter than the restaurant people, because the restaurant people are like, hey, we have to pay for this building and this space, and we've outlaid all this cash. I wouldn't be I know the woman whose family runs Blue Highway, and so they like my pizza, but, you know, they're in the business of having a shop and not, you know, mobile. So, you know, the restaurants see mobile people as kind of, I don't know, oh, those are the mobile people.
But it's on the rise right now, so
Right.
What can they really say?
Yeah, I was in Orange Park for the wedding that I was telling you about earlier, and I passed the corner there on Sunday, and they had a huge farmer's market and a whole big food truck layout. And I was like, wow, this is pretty big over here.
Yeah. Like, I think it's like, even around here, I know you're more out in that Hale area, but I feel like there's a lot of like Fourth Point Avenue or something. There's just like random little pockets of it. So
Right.
I definitely think it's in market, and clearly it's working. So,
Yeah, right.
you know, and another like rise of like social media in a way. I feel like it's come alongside this rise in mobile marketing. Like, how do you think that's affected your business, maybe on like the advertising front or just more generally?
So yeah, social media, you know, most of my Facebook posts and Instagram I try to do organically, just by putting posts out every week. So Instagram and Facebook, they're, well, Meta, they're all kind of interconnected. So if I post on one, it'll post on the other. So I do have older people that are on Facebook that may not be on Instagram, and vice versa. So it's good cross-platforming that the older people that are on Facebook, because you're probably TikTok, right? Not Facebook so much. It's just an age gap, whatever interface, you know, like you're used to. So yeah, digital marketing has come like a long way. My credit card processor, Square, you can design a free website through them. You could do online ordering. I was doing online ordering during COVID, which made it easier for customers. So they knew what was there and they could prepay and then just pick up and be on their way. Now it's just I have so many pizzas to make, I have to turn online ordering off. And that's what third-party delivery now you find in every restaurant. They're having the same issue because third-party came on strong during COVID, and now they've got regular customers back, and now they don't want to turn the third-party ordering off. But at some point, who do you want to upset? The customers that are walking in that are standing in front of you, right, or the other customer that has so many other options to choose from. So it's a balancing act.
Right. That's a really poignant insight. I assume you're not involved with any third party.
No. And if I had a shop, I probably would do it based on what kind of because they charge you a certain percentage. So the more stores you have, you can get a better rate. So we'll say, for instance, there's only one honey baked ham store in town, but there are 400 across the US. So somebody like Grubhub or DoorDash, Honey Baked Corporate could say to them, hey, if we put you in all 400 stores, what kind of rate can we get? The standard rate's about 25% commission. Wow. So a lot of people that order DoorDash or Grubhub don't realize they're paying that 25% because the restaurant's not paying it.
Right.
And then you're going to pay the delivery fee and everything else on top of it. So it really, it's consumer. So whatever the consumer wants, you have to raise your prices to pay for it. But that's what they want. So people are still ordering.
Yeah.
It's convenience.
Of course. That's very interesting. I feel
it's a convenience fee.
Yeah. People are always talking about how expensive it is, and it's true.
Well, how far is it to go down the road and pick something up? Right?
It's very true. Is there any memory you haven't mentioned that really stands out to you? It's something you would really like to be documented?
No, just the trips to Italy. They're the greatest, the freshest food. It's glad to see. We'll see what Bobby Kennedy Jr. does with the food system in the U.S. That's the biggest thing that I had no clue about when I was on the engineering side. And then even when you start out just doing little things in the restaurant, and then you realize the franchising model kind of in the U.S., in my opinion, has hurt the food system, because before America came along, or let's say the Industrial Revolution, right? Everybody had a garden, they were raising chickens and animals, and they were taking care of them, and people may not have lived longer, but I think they led a healthier lifestyle overall. Right. And the Europeans just, with the food dyes and the additives, it's just, they just eat very fresh, very clean. In the US, because of the franchising model, the global produce, if you think about it, tomatoes can't grow in Florida all year round. So where do those tomatoes come from? Well, they first start growing them in Mexico, and then you have problems with E. coli. And then they start growing in South Florida, like in January. So January to March, unless you have a greenhouse, that's when the end of the tomato season. And then then you chase the tomatoes in the U.S. as you go farther north. So the U.S. tomato, besides California, you're getting tomatoes from Canada by August, because of the growing seasons. And it's the same with lettuce. It's the same with the commodity stuff, right? You're gonna have a sandwich, you want lettuce, tomato, onion. Well, you gotta find those somewhere. And same with fruit. Fruit coming up from South America. Well, how can all this stuff make it from South America? They're not flying it.
Right.
And it could take a week to get tomatoes from A to B. So they're putting something on these things so they either appear fresh or will last longer. They're gassing the tomatoes, or they're putting some kind of chemical on them. So.
With that, like, desire for freshness, where do you source, like, I know you really talked about your dough, but do you, like, what is the process for getting the other ingredients involved with your pizza?
So my tomatoes and sauce comes from California, and it's a family-owned business. They've been in business since early 1900s, so they're well respected in the private community of pizza makers, because there's two sides to the pizza making. One is your chain restaurants, right. Domino's, Papa John's, and then the private side. So the chain guys are about the margins. How cheaper can we get this cheese? And they're buying cheese 5 years so they're buying futures so they can make money for their franchisees and get the cost down to a workable profit margin. Some years that works, like we're having egg issues right now. Right. Well, we destroyed so many chickens. Where are the eggs going to come from? So it's that kind of, it's a fragile system where one thing can just set off a chain reaction where we're dealing with egg prices now. So for me, my cheese fluctuates throughout the year based on the milk supply. My cheese comes from Wisconsin. My tomatoes come from California. My flour is American from King Arthur, which you can see in Publix, but it doesn't have any additives or they're not adding any extra stuff into it. My pepperoni is local, it's a large chain. Same with the sausage, and then I get whatever veggies I can get in fresh I use. So I try to keep it to not have 50 different pizzas, because what happens if I can't get this one ingredient?
Right. So
it's better to just have a smaller scale menu and it's easier on pizza making, so we don't have to worry about 50 different combinations.
You mentioned the local sausage, and besides pizza, you now have these breakfast burritos. Can you talk a little bit about that process of adding that to what you have? Yeah,
so Fehrenbacher's sausage, he's got a shop downtown, I think 4th Avenue. I think he's across from Dick Mondell's. You've been there?
Yes.
Okay. So he's across the street, and he was at the farmer's market. He was a chef with Mildred's, and he was making all their sausages. And he had an idea, well, I can make these, I can sell these. So he was at the same farmer's market I was, and he was making breakfast burritos to showcase his sausage and sell sausage. Well, then he left when he moved into a shop, and I had no more breakfast burrito to eat. So we were just making them one day, and people were like, oh, are you making breakfast burritos now? Well, yeah, I guess we are now. So that's how the breakfast burrito started for us. And now I'm thinking about adding something else, because now I'm having people come, and not because we kind of pre-make them and have them ready to go. So we have people that are, do you have any without meat? Do you have any without cheese? So now I'm thinking about making an Italian breakfast dish. It's called, I'm drawing a blank. It's like shakshuka, but in Italian it's called something else. But it's basically eggs in tomato sauce. And then I might put cheese, but there won't be any meat in it. So I'm trying to help the people out that don't eat meat.
It's really interesting. I feel like that would definitely do very
Eggs
well.
in Purgatory, that's what the name is.
Eggs in Purgatory?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting name. That is going to be very Italian.
Right, but. That is very Italian, yeah.
And what is that process of creating something like that? How long does it take you from the idea to implementing that?
I have all kinds of crazy ideas, but it always comes down to how quickly can we assemble it, how many moving parts are. Wouldn't it be great? We have these sessions every time when we're making pizza, wouldn't it be great if we did this? And then I start breaking down and compartmentalizing, okay, the logistics of this, now we're gonna have to add this. Is it really gonna be worth it or not? And that's kind of how the pizza specials go. Every week it'll either come to me right away, I'll know what I wanna do, or it may take the whole week for me to come up with a special. And sometimes it's based on what ingredient do I have that I need to get through. So that's how the pickle pizza started, the Dilly Dilly pickle pizza.
Wow.
It was a special. And then the next week, a couple more people said, hey, are you making that pickle pizza again? No, it's a special. More people kept asking, so now it's been on the regular menu now for like the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And we just do various variations on that. Like last week we added jalapenos and bacon to the pickles.
Whoa. That's really interesting. I feel like I need to try this now. How many menu items do you have?
Just pizza and breakfast burritos.
How many like types of pizza, I mean?
Maybe 5. I mean, a cheese, a veggie, pepperoni sausage. I have a margarita, but then we'll do a variation on it. So margarita, people will, can I add this? Yes, we'll always do create your own kind of pizza, but standard menu, 5 or 6 pizzas.
Solid. That's wonderful. And so you have these items in front of us. Can
I
you
do,
tell us
yeah.
a little bit more?
So this is, you see that? So this is a,
You could hold it up just a little bit more.
so this was one of the places that I went, Torre Lupara. This is a water buffalo farm where they make buffalo mozzarella. So most people hear buffalo mozzarella, and they don't realize that the milk actually comes from water buffalo.
Wow.
And the water buffalo ended up in Italy from China, wherever water buffaloes come from. They're not from Italy. Well, they ended up there over 1,000 years. And so they have, water buffalo has the highest fat content in their milk. And that's why they use buffalo mozzarella on Neapolitan pizza. So we met the family. They've been doing this. The family's been managing this water buffalo farm for 30, 40 years. And they have several fields, and there's like 3 brothers, and each brother has a certain number in his herd. And they have water buffaloes, they don't sweat. So they built these cooling pools that they get in the water and kind of cool themselves down on. And so hearing them talk about how they treat the water buffalo. Sure, so they have X amount of land, excuse me, X amount of land, they could put more water buffaloes on there. They could breed more water buffaloes. But their motto is, we only want so many water buffaloes because we want them to be happy, healthy, free of disease. Actually, when the bus came in, we had to stop and they kind of sprayed underneath the bus so no foreign, stuff was brought into the farm. We wore like plastic booties on our shoes. And so, yeah, they make amazing buffalo mozzarella. And then when the males get old enough, then they make them into sausage. That's just the life cycle, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they make buffalo gelato, and the sausage and the cheese. This cheese gets shipped all over the country, all over the world. And then I have said I had competed in Italy. That's my nice little 16th place placard there. And I have a little thing here, there. This is supposed to be framed. You can tell that was over 2 years ago. I'm quite busy. Hasn't been framed yet, but I'm getting there.
It's kind of an awkward size for a frame anyway, so.
Well, it'd have to be kind of weird.
That's very cool. They should have given you a frame actually with it, but so
I wanted the trophy.
How many trophies do they give out?
So for this one that I competed in, it was first, second, and third. Obviously, I was 16, so I was getting a trophy. I just got this little placard thing.
That's super cool. And with the Water Buffalo one,
They have my business. Yeah, they had my business name on there. So there were people that from different pizzerias, and they had this laid out, and little gifts, and it was like, thanks for buying our cheese, and so it's kind of a, hey, buy our cheese, and thanks for being, it's they're trying to get more business, but they can only make so much mozzarella, but they're thankful that people are buying it and spreading the word about their product.
That's really cool. I had literally no clue about this. So, wow. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was very interesting. And if there's any last words you would like to share?
No, I'm good.
All right. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.